Thank you for attending today. My name is Zach Smith, along with my colleague Betsy Miller. We are part of the UVM Ag Business team. Today, we're going to discuss our farm succession planner, and we'll go over the top scenarios that we recommend you assess as you go through farm succession planning. The agricultural business team engages with farm, forest, and maple enterprises throughout the state of Vermont. We work on planning and educational resources for enhanced decision-making on the farm. We offer one-on-one, small group, and online learning opportunities. Our programs and research provide direction for key stakeholders to advance initiatives that improve business outcomes in a dynamic agricultural sector. The farm succession planner is meant to be a source of professional support for farmers throughout Vermont as they strengthen their knowledge of available resources for succession planning. Our agricultural business specialists work with farmers to support decision-making during the farm succession planning process. UVM Extension Agricultural Business specialists will give direct feedback during this planning process that will lead to an improved knowledge and decision-making skills for farmers interested in succession planning. Why are we doing this? Why are we offering this service? We recognize that all farms are unique, and in many cases, farms face a variety of situations when planning to transfer the farm to new ownership. Many situations can be overwhelming, and our goal is to support farmers through this complex process. There are many sources of information out there, and though many of you may have already started looking, but there are wonderful sources of information like those from Land for Good, several extension services throughout the state, and independent professionals. What we want to do is support you so that you do not get overwhelmed with decision-making and get sidelined by decision fatigue. So moving into the top scenarios that we would like you to consider as you're going through this process, we'll discuss about 5 major areas that we like to focus on when we go into a transfer planning process. First of all, we like to take a snapshot of the current situation. Next, we like to consider the farm transfer goals. And then we have to make a plan for the exiting farmers. And then we look at farm financials and business management. And then we start to consider the acquisition plan for the new owners of the farm. So we'll dive into these scenarios now. When we're looking at a snapshot of the current situation, we want to consider and write down all of the stakeholders that are involved in this process. This has to do with not just the owners of the farm, but the family members, neighbors, professionals that you're already enlisting the help of, like an accountant or an attorney. We just want to get that all out on the paper and make sure that we understand who's interacting with this business. We want to consider the legal structure of the business. We also want to just check out a financial overview of what's happening right now with the business. How is it looking? We want to make sure we want to do like basically a look at the health of the business, because if there's anything that pops up that will need some more attention, like, perhaps there are some liabilities that need to be considered before the transfer. We need to know about it right now so we can make some adjustments in planning around that. We want to consider the present legal structure. And we also want to look at how is the farm operating, how is the present management going, and how is the decision-making structure on the farm. And so once we have a good look at this, the snapshot of the current situation, we move into considering what the goals are. So for each stakeholder, be that the owners, family members, or whomever that we consider and define as a stakeholder, we want to talk about each and every one of their goals. This is also a point where it's a little sticky, because this is also considering perhaps non-farm workers, people that are working off the farm, and so it's just really important to be honest with yourself and start with, like, what I like to do is I start with a blue sky scenario. where each stakeholder tells me and writes down what they would like to do in the future, how they see themselves during the transfer and after the transfer of the farm. And it's really important to be honest with yourself in this scenario. And then when we consider all of the goals for each stakeholder, we want to put down a timeline for the key steps of the transfer of management and the farm assets and or real estate. So this is a very complicated process, and this does take time. There are many goals, and sometimes these goals include when a farmer does not want to give up complete control of the management or ownership of a farm. I see this a lot with multi-generational families. When the next generation wants to take over, well, sometimes the current generation just doesn't want to release the reins of everything, but wants to do it in a gradual process. So it's really, really important to create a timeline that makes sense to everybody and that everybody can agree upon. The farm assets are very, very important. It's not just the land, but there are considerations that have to be in place for all of the equipment and machinery. And yes, obviously the real estate is very important to get a good understanding of the timeline. And when you start going through this process, especially elaborating the timeline, you do realize that there are some pretty hefty prices and some pretty hefty numbers involved in here. And there are limitations to a next generation to take over some certain farm assets and also ownership of the farm business. So it's important to be very honest and write down the description and create descriptions of the challenges or the issues that are affecting a successful farm transfer. In many cases, when we come to situations like this, it's really important to bring in a third party like a business planner, just to make sure that they are able to consider every single party's perspective involved and just create that realistic timeline and get a realistic understanding of the values that are involved in this transfer process. And then during this transfer process, we need to create, we need to do a financial analysis, a real in-depth financial analysis of the current business to see where it is, and then create a valuation of that business. And like I said, there are many sticky points involved in the transfer planning process. And what we want to do is make sure that everybody can read off the same page when it comes to a comfortable valuation of the business that will be transferred to new ownership. We also, what I find is when we're going through the finances of a business, when we're doing that current snapshot of a business, a lot of people on their books will just do the assessed value of a lot of their assets that they own, where they should be also taking a really good look at the fair market value of all of these assets. This is also a very tricky situation when it's going between generations in a family. I find that a lot of even parents want to make sure that they're giving the next generation a chance to afford the transfer, to afford ownership of these assets, but they also want to make sure that they're not giving things away. So when you coming to and understanding the value, the fair market value of your assets will allow you to create a better valuation of the business. And it's really important to discuss this not only with the owners, but also with the potential future owners. And another kind of sticky point that I run into quite a bit with exiting farmers is their assessment of their retirement needs. A lot of farms that I work with don't even really they don't really have too much of a grasp of what's going in and out of their business when they're on a monthly basis. And so what I always encourage for them, for all farmers to do, is to create a retirement plan not only create a budget, but also just pay attention to that blue sky scenario for your goals. Perhaps it's time to really embrace taking some time off for once. So building goals in like that is really important to your budget and to the yearly budget. So what I normally recommend is for people to create a budget, the budget template, and come up with write down some numbers of what they think they spend per month throughout the year, and start tracking it during this process. Just, in April, just say, this is, write down what you anticipate spending, like what your expenses are, and then also put them up against your sources of income. And coming to sources of income, we really like for the farmers, when they're planning for their retirement, to understand all sources of income that are going to be coming into them. And also, it's not just the fixed income that you'll be receiving during retirement, but also perhaps you've integrated some form of agreement into the business deal for the new owners, where you'll actually be receiving income from the business. So it's really important to get all of this on paper, so you understand that and don't get any surprises after the transfer has been made. Continuation, when we are considering the exiting farmer plan, we have to come up with an estate plan, and definitions of powers of attorney need to be addressed. I see this kind of all over the board, with people not really addressing this until it's too late. And so it's really important to get an estate plan in place and establish powers of attorney. This is when you're working with business planners like myself, or with anybody in the ag business team, this is where we identify the need for specialists to be hired to come in to provide their professional feedback in these areas. Also, mechanisms of asset transfer are very, very important. Like I was saying too before, what I was referring to before is sometimes a new farmer or new farmers cannot completely take over everything in one transfer, in one action. It needs to be, or it is agreed upon that there's a timeline to transfer assets little by little over time, and so this needs to be understood and agreed upon by all parties. And another major area that I feel that this is being asked all the time of me are tax considerations, and that all comes from writing everything down on paper and looking at different scenarios to make sure that tax implications are not going to affect the sellers nor the buyers. And this is also an area where we bring in more professional support, just to make sure that we're navigating all of the tax laws correctly. And once again, once all of these points have been considered in the planning process, perhaps it's time to revisit this timeline and make a realistic timeline of what can happen in this situation. So while we're considering everything, there's a major step is understanding farm financials and the business management processes on the farm. During this time, we refer back to a summary of the current financial situation. We're going to look at all of your major financial statements, or we're going to create major financial statements of recent history, and then we're gonna work together with you, the exiting farmer, and with acquiring farmers, and we want to create a SWOT analysis. Some of you may have heard of this, but it's a good process to go through, where we define the strengths of the company, the weaknesses of the company, and then the opportunities and the threats that the company faces. The strengths and the weaknesses can be considered internal. We'll look at the business internally now and how it would look in the future. And then the opportunities and threats are basically external influences that face the business and in its current form, and then how we could perceive it, those opportunities and threats to be in the future for that the business could face. When we write all of this down and get it all on paper, everybody just gets a really good understanding of what needs to be done, and that also goes in line with cash flow projections for the future. What we like to do is not only we don't just do cash flow projections for the acquiring business or the acquirers of the business. We like to look at cash flow projections for the current situation and for the current farmers, because maybe there are deals in place where the current owners will stay on and work or stay on and be advisors in some capacity. And that always involves, you have to pay them for that. So we want to fix in those payments and other payments that could come up into the cash flow projections of the business in the future to make sure that those expenses can be covered. We want to do a management analysis. We want to make sure that that everybody is going to be able to take over these businesses. A lot of these businesses that are getting transferred have been in the same management for many decades, and it's not just easy to write it down on paper and say, here you go, take it over and move on from here. It's really, really important to understand what it takes to continue this business. And in that manner, we have to look at, we have to be very, very honest to see the feasibility of this transfer. We have to look at considerations for any type of operation changes, any management changes, any technological changes, machinery, equipment. All of that needs to be understood. It has to make sense financially, and everybody has to be on board, because the next step is to say, all right, here's the plan, we're moving forward. And when you do that assessment, there may be a need for further business planning, and there are business planners like our ag business team. There are other service providers throughout the state of Vermont that can provide further business planning in the case that there may be some changes that are made on the farm, that the new ownership just needs some business planning support, that more intensive business planning support to be successful while they take over the business. So during that acquisition phase, we want to make sure that we're identifying a suitable successor. We need to understand the mechanisms that we defined earlier of the asset acquisition. The successor has to understand and agree to those mechanisms, and there should be an understanding of the capital sources that will be involved in this acquisition. This can be everything from just getting an understanding sometimes of whether there will be conservation involved, if there's going to be gradual acquisition of the business over time. So we need to look at the timeline, and then also where capital sources will be applied in this timeline of the acquisition. As stated before, we need to get on paper the anticipated management changes, and we have to understand if there's going to be a need for business planning or further feasibility analyses, and then write those down on a timeline. So with our farm succession planner that we offer at UVM, and I will be sending out links to this planner, the way that it works, the process that it works is a farm contacts UVM our ag business team through a contact form that we have online, or if you happen to reach out to any of us that sometimes we'll just get a phone call and then get you going into the process. But once you contact us, if it's a farm that's selling or if it's a farm that's buying, we'll look into it and we'll review your info. And then we like to set up a call just to get a further understanding of where you are in this process. Like I was saying before, it's a very, very complex process, and every farm is unique. And we want to make sure that we're getting a good understanding of the situation. So we talk, and then in most cases, a farmer will complete a secondary assessment form that explains the situation to us. We can take some more time to gather our resources and provide feedback to you. And this usually is a case of us aggregating the most valuable resources that we feel would be applicable to your situation. And then we provide this feedback. We can either just send you an email and that's that, or we can set up another meeting and we can go over each and every resource that we have defined as applicable to your situation. And then, then we'll continue a follow-up loop, to make sure that we're providing everything that's necessary to facilitate your decision-making process. Some farms just want a little bit of information now. Some farms say, well, I want to complete a transfer within the next year. So, there's all different ways of interacting with us. And so our AgBiz team, first and foremost, I want to express that this is a free service that we offer. We're available to work with owners to assess and plan for business changes in relationship to the farm transfer and succession goals that they have. Farm owners can have one-on-one sessions with us, either online by phone or online or by phone with a business educator to evaluate the feasibility and impacts of facing the farm and the business. And when necessary, we provide recommendations and introductions to other specialists that can support you in your decision-making process. And now, as we're slowly getting out of the current situation that we've been in for the past 2 years of kind of being strictly online and on the phone, there are opportunities to make visits to the farm just to get a better understanding, because sometimes the best way to meet with someone is or to understand a situation is to meet face to face. So we always encourage that when it's appropriate. And if for any questions that you may have, you can follow this link that I will share by email to everybody, and you can submit an inquiry through that. And I just wanted to say that this material is based upon work supported by the USDA, NIFA, and the Northeast Extension Management Education Program. So thank you all very much for being here. I can open up the presentation now to any questions that anyone may have. Please feel free to unmute yourself and we can discuss.
Well, I have a question, Zach.
Sure.
Sure. So my name is Ike Leslie. I'm a farmer here at Magnetic Fields Farm in Athens, Vermont. And we have a little bit of a unique structure here. We focus on attracting and sustaining queer and BIPOC farm community. And so we have other queer and BIPOC farmers operating their own businesses here on our farm. But our farm is currently just owned by me and my husband. And what we're interested in doing and working towards is transitioning it to a more cooperative structure, more cooperative ownership structure, both on the farm side and then also on the other side of the road in our big farmhouse where a bunch of different folks live. So I'm wondering if you could talk about any experience or resources you might have in transitioning to cooperative structures. Thanks.
Well, yeah, thank you for that question. And I will say that topic is becoming it's becoming more popular. And we've gotten that question a few times in the last couple of years. And I don't have an exact answer for you on that right now, because there's more to the subject. But we do have business planners that have worked in those scenarios in the past. And Ike, if you'd like to reach out to me directly, I can support you with that. But it's creating a cooperative agreement is it is a complicated process, and it's definitely not it's not unachievable, obviously. But what we like to do in those scenarios is bring in our specialists that can support that, that have actual extensive experience in creating those agreements.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'll be reaching out. Thanks so much.
Yeah, appreciate it. But if anybody else has some questions, feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, I will be providing a follow-up with a recording of this this presentation, and also some links to explore more information and also to get in contact with us. Okay, thank you all very much for participating, and we will be in contact hopefully. So take care and have a wonderful day.